All right. Welcome to another episode of Workforce on Deck. We have some special guests with us today from an up and coming company called Traxxion. We have Jim and Kevin with us. And of course, I usually call her my sidekick. Then she corrects me and tells me I'm her sidekick. Dr. Sarah Inman's with me today as well. All right. So let's get started. So, Jim, Kevin, you guys want to introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about yourselves and where you come from and background, and then we'll jump into Traxxion. All right. Take it away, Kevin.
Thanks, Vince, and thanks, Sarah. Thanks for having us. Yeah, just you know what? I've been in this industry for probably about a little over 30 years now. And WFM is just it. Nobody wakes up and thinks it's going to be a passion of yours, but over the years, you get really drawn to it. And so, I've spent my time at some larger customers that are in the industry today, specifically at UKG, at Ceridian, at WorkBrain. So I have a lot of experience in the industry and just started taking a look at it and figuring that, you know what, there's probably a better way to do things than what's been done already. And so partnered up with Jim and he can tell you a little bit about that in a little bit, but it's been an exciting ride so far and we've got a lot more coming.
Awesome. Awesome. Jim, take it away.
All right, sure. So I'm Jim Jensen. And so Kevin and I had worked together for a number of years, both at Ultimate Software and at Ceridian and Dayforce. And one of the things about Kevin, I was always impressed with his composure in the sales process and how he handled questions from customers and his ability to articulate what the solution did without having to jump to the screen to try to show what was going on, but his composure and ability to be able to walk them through the process and then reinforce it by showing them what we were able to do. And so when we launched Traxxion, Kevin was a natural from a product perspective. One thing that I found is while I have had over 30 years in the HCM industry, I at Ultimate, at Ceridian, I didn't have as much experience with WFM. My world was mostly the HCM side. And we had WFM with our partnerships with WorkBrain and with NovaTime and then at Dayforce. But candidly, I kind of took that for granted until I really started to understand the complexity of workforce management and how everything else downstream was layered on top of that, independent on that. And so what I found as we launched Traxxion and we're bringing people into the organization is it's great for people to have a all-encompassing knowledge of HCM and how they all work together. But WFM is a really unique creature, if you will, and finding people that really understand WFM and the foundational element of it is a bit of a challenge. And so finding somebody like Kevin that's been on both sides of that, really understands WFM well, and then can also speak to the entire HCM process and understands everything from payroll to HR to benefits, et cetera, was a unique find for us. So anyway, I'm Jim.
I'm gonna embarrass Kevin a little bit here right out of the gate just to start us off strong. So we've talked before, prior to this podcast, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon of workforce management and HCM when you work in this industry, right? So many of us have crossed paths before or worked with somebody who worked with somebody. And my colleagues and friends in this industry had mentioned Kevin, this Kevin, so many times. And Kevin and I had not worked together before. And then when we finally met, I realized that he was the Kevin that all of my HCM friends had told me about over the years, this WFM genius guru guy that they had worked with all this time. And he was the guy. But it's so interesting when those worlds collide and you find somebody, just as you mentioned, Jim, who understands both of those worlds, because it's not something that just innately happens in our space. Usually you find people who they know WFM or they know HCM, but to get someone who can walk the line between both so naturally is really rare. So it was nice to finally be on the inside and get to know Kevin as well and not just be the one who was hearing all the Kevin stories. So yeah, five
Well,
minutes in, Kevin, and I figured I'd make you blush. So
well, that's very kind of you. I don't know if I would believe everything that they say, but it's very kind for you to say.
Or
Yeah.
most of what they said.
Right. I was wondering, a point of clarification, were they warning you about Kevin
That,
or
that's where I thought this
encouraging
was
you
going.
to? Yeah.
mostly
Well,
good stories. It was mostly positive, but again, we don't always share tales from the road, okay? When you're in this industry a long time, some sales calls are sales calls, and I'll just leave it at that. But it's when you get a good WFM person, those are people you protect with your life, and it tends to be the kind of thing that even when you aren't working with them on a daily basis, you just know who they are. So again, when we finally had the opportunity to meet in person, it was this light bulb moment for me. And one of my best friends in this space, I texted her immediately and said, "You're never going to believe who I just met." And again, it's great to now have the opportunity to partner with you and work with you because when you are passionate about this stuff, Kevin, you mentioned it, right? Nobody wakes up at 10 years old and goes, "Mommy, I want to be in workforce management when I grow up." But when the bug hits you, it hits you. And, to have people that you can share these experiences with and have these conversations and who are interested in it enough to, answer the call that, "Why, yes, Sarah and Vince, I'd love to be on your podcast and talk about this," is certainly a rare find. So we're thrilled to have you.
Well,
Yeah.
and again, to the uniqueness about it, like we've all said here, is that the workforce management world, up until just a few years ago, it was very siloed, right? There was workforce management was its own company, and WorkBrain was its own company, Kronos was its own company. All these WFMs were these standalone solutions. So they could kind of do whatever they wanted and never had to worry about the implications downstream or upstream with payroll and HCM and all the rest. And then they all start coming together. And now they're like, well, wait a minute. What I do here foundationally impacts everything down here. Now I'm responsible for both sides of the equation, and it changes things quite a bit actually. So I think even though we are now standalone WFM, we understand those things and are now even though we're standalone, we're bringing those understandings to Traxxion as we build it out. So we're not building in a silo, if you will.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So let's pivot a little bit and actually talk about that. You know, you talked about that you wanted to, you both said something around seeing an opportunity for a WFM standalone again that supports things. So tell us about that a little bit more. Tell us about what's the purpose behind Traxxion? What's the purpose of what you're trying to build here or are building and already have to some degree? And let's just land there of what you got.
Yeah. So when Traxxion, when we originally set out to build Traxxion, it wasn't that hard to look at the other players in the space and see where there were opportunities for improvement. If you look at Dayforce, when David Ossip set out to build Dayforce, it was building pay and time on a single platform. Nobody had really done that. Nobody had really innovated payroll in years until Dayforce did it with pay and time on the same platform. So you had real-time continuous pay calculations, right? Nobody had really innovated payroll in a long time. And so with workforce management, it was kind of a similar thing. There's very few players, real players in the WFM space, and there wasn't the compelling reasons to really innovate around WFM. So it was very easy for products that were long in the tooth with, functional debt and technical debt. It was very easy for them to kind of make incremental improvements and still be able to, do their business because wasn't a lot of competition or new entrants coming into that space. And the same can be said for payroll too. There's not a lot of new payroll companies coming into the space. And so we looked at what those other solutions, the big ones like, Kronos, Dimension, and Ready, and Dayforce, and maybe Workforce Software, and Swipe Clock, some of the others. And we found that it really wasn't that there was a lot of room for improvement from a user experience, primarily with the frontline worker. We, saw a lot of dissatisfaction with employees and how difficult it is to try to manage their schedule, know when they're working, be able to handle anomalies in the schedule where they need to swap shifts with somebody else or put a shift out to bid or grab additional shifts. Is this going to push me into overtime? And managing all that was challenging. And then on the back end, handling the compliance and the labor laws and the collective bargaining agreements and unions and attestations and all that, that was challenging as well. And then even from large, vendors like Kronos, getting the data from the gross to net engine into the zero to gross engine, and then getting the zero to gross data back into the gross to net engine was still being done through manual file import and export. And we thought, well, with web services, interconnectivity, there's certainly a way to do that. And then lastly, having been in the industry and really, sold single solution, single vendor kind of scenario, that worked really well in the mid-market. But when you got up into the enterprise space, they would go best of breed. They wanted the best workforce management system, the best recruitment and onboarding system, the best payroll engine, the best HR. And they had the resources to make that all work together and aggregate the data. Well, now with technology the way it is, there's no reason why a mid-market customer can't achieve the same things. Well, okay, great. I go with a single vendor for everything. Some of it's really good, some of it's not so great, but it's a single system, so I kind of take what I can and make do with it. But it doesn't have to be reserved for big enterprise customers anymore. With technology the way it is, with web services the way it is, you should be able to interconnect these solutions and make them operate as a single offering and be able to span the full product suite, again, like what enterprise customers have done for a long time. And so we felt there was a great opportunity. We had built this product and had it in use with some some large customers, 14,000 employees and down to 100 employees that were using it effectively. I remember when Kevin was telling me about one of our customers, he said, I got to be honest with you, I've used a lot of systems. This is the first one that it's actually a joy to use. Like, I'm having fun in this system. Nobody ever said that about WFM or payroll or HCM in general, right? So so to hear that, we were like, okay, yes, we're on the right track. And then when we would demo the product to organizations like yourselves and others that are live in this world and have seen every product out there and use every product, it's a little we were a little nervous, like how would they see it and how, would they be able to pick it apart. And invariably, every partner that we've shown the product to, one, they're really impressed with how far along we are with the product. Two, the user experience of the product and the things that we've thought through and really like really thoughtfully worked through some of the challenges that people have that you would think are just kind of, well, it's just common sense, right? But evidently it's not because nobody else was doing it. And so to hear the feedback from partners and customers of where we are with the product and how far along we are with the product, it let us know that we're on the right track. Are we there 100%? No, but we're gaining every day on that. And like I said, we have some pretty large customers using the product successfully, very happy with it. We're fortunate that our technology stack is also contemporary. It's a modern tech stack. So as customers are using it and they're saying, this is great, but it would be really great if it could do this and this and this. And we go, yeah, that makes sense. That's something that would be generally available to a customer. Bam, we're able to implement that in a very short period of time and actually get it into the customer's hands and them be able to effectively use that.
Yeah,
And
that's awesome.
and Vince, I think, just to kind of piggyback on that, right? I think it's almost answering the why question, right? Why do you do what you do? And when we thought about with Traction, right, there's been so many times over the years you sit down with managers or you sit down with payroll personnel and they're working late into the evening, right? They're not able to make it home to get to family dinners or they're missing ball games because of these complicated and convoluted processes that they're having to deal with, right? Because it's not just when we think about WFM, right? I'm thinking it's not just software, right? It affects people's pay, it affects their schedules, it affects their daily experience. And so, looking at when Jim and I were talking more and more about what can we do with the software, knowing what's out there already, right? Because we quickly realized when workforce management works well, right? Organizations they operate better and employees overall have a better experience. And so, those all kind of factor into some of the reasons why we looked at, how can we help improve that experience?
Mhm.
Not just with software, but, being able to help them, at the end of the day, be able to help them get home, when they want to get home, because now you've got a software that's working for you and they're not working for the software.
Yeah.
I that's so interesting because one of the questions that I wanted to ask you guys was, with working in this space for so long, what were the client challenges that really kind of jumped out at you that you wanted to solve for? And not to put words in your mouth, but it sounds like from what both of you just shared, one of the biggest things that you were trying to address was the employee challenges. Because in the last 5 minutes, I've heard you talk more about wanting to solve your client's problems than I usually hear, period. When you're talking to any type of vendor, it's how can we get people home, to their kids so they can watch their ball game? How can we take those needs and immediately turn around some type of new enhancement to the product and, add that to our stack? And those aren't the types of things that you're hearing people talk about as the why behind it.
Mhm.
And that's really compelling. And I think that comes from, the combined experiences of people who have been in this space for so long and see the impact of the people who are doing the work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I
So
mean, it's in our tagline, the people focus. We came from, the ultimate software. It was people first. And we came from Dayforce where it was making your work life better. And when oftentimes the frontline worker kind of gets forgot about and they're told, well, just make it work, or well, just figure it out, or just whatever. Well, when you talk about employee engagement, if you want to see employee engagement, get an employee's paycheck wrong by a nickel. They'll engage with you for sure. Right. And they'll leave a company and go across the street for a nickel more an hour, 10 cents more an hour. So how do you my whole career, my job has been as a leader to remove roadblocks so the people that are in my care can be successful. Right. My job is not to so much to tell them what to do, but allow them to do what they do it well, remove barriers or roadblocks from them being successful. And if they're successful, I'm successful. So if my frontline employees are hindered in their ability to manage their schedule, to be able to request additional, people want to work, they want to make money. And if they have to fight the systems to find opportunities to work, they're going to go somewhere where it's not as difficult to work, right? So to be able to interact with, a solution and say, "Hey, when can I pick up another shift this week and it won't put me into overtime?" Or, "When am I scheduled again?" "Well, you're scheduled on Friday." "Oh, I've got a doctor's appointment. Can you find somebody else I can swap my shift with for me?" Or, "Can you find me another shift where I can get more hours this week that won't push me into overtime?" Or if it does, find a minimal impact and then go ask the supervisor if they'll approve that overtime, so that I can pick up additional shift hours, right? I mean, why did everybody come up with on-demand pay or early wage access? Because it was difficult for employees to be able to go a week or 2 weeks and wait for money they've already earned. Well, let's let them have access to it right away. And one of our largest partnerships is we've already partnered with a number of early wage access vendors like Chime and Keeper and Daily Pay and others that rely on time data to be able to calculate algorithmically what an employee has access to for early wage access. So I think they go hand in hand, but it's all about giving the frontline employee a communication platform, a way to see when they're going to work, how much money they've earned, when they can work again, and do it in a way that's not a roadblock or a challenge for them.
Yeah. This is awesome, and I love everything I'm hearing. I do wanna get to AI a little bit. Before we do that, though, I wanna talk about, so I've ran more RFPs and vendor selections than I ever want to actually share or claim.
I'm sorry.
And some of the things I picked up from what you guys said was you you minimize the total cost of ownership, right?
Yep.
So that you allow mid-market and below to actually do best of breed. You've produced a higher ROI for your value of everything you're getting,
Mhm.
and you've improved the customer engagement experience dramatically.
Yeah.
And I believe that. I've seen the UI. So what tell me a little bit about some of the as you've gone through and you've had these companies select you guys already, what's the feedback you're getting? What are they saying? What's the experience been? Once the rubber hits the road, what are you seeing and what are you hearing?
I'll let Kevin take that.
Well, I mean, 'cause we've had the privilege of, engaging with a lot of our customers, especially after they're up and running, right? And
Yeah.
it's been nice even when you hear, right, one of our larger customers, they brought up, I don't know, it was 50 or 60 sites pretty quickly. And I hadn't really spoken to him a lot about training those sites. And one of the main leaders, he was like, "Oh, don't worry about it." He goes, "The app was so easy, we didn't need training, right? We just rolled it out and they very quickly logged on. They could figure out how to very quickly punch in, punch out, do a transfer, request leave." And it got me thinking, and Jim and I were talking about this. We said, when was the last time that you downloaded an app and you had to be trained on it? Because if that's the case, it's probably not a very good app to begin with, right? So it's been rewarding to hear that type of feedback from the customers, because I think for so long, the industry just assumed, right? WFM is the most complicated part of the whole HCM world, right? At least in my opinion. And because of that, I think people just lived with the idea that it had to be complicated, it had to be, difficult to install and to manage. But now I think we're changing that viewpoint, and the nice thing is now we're hearing it back from the actual customers that it is easy to use, right? They can very easily go in and set up some rules for one location and then clone it again and have multiple locations set up very, very quickly without having to build everything from scratch over and over and over again. So I think the tools are available to them, and the experience has been very, very positive, which has been nice to hear from a development perspective.
Mhm. Yeah, and we didn't just do all that on the frontline employee side either. We've done it in the administration side as well, which usually gets the least love and attention. But we've done it there too because we saw just in with other systems in the market, there were just levels of complexity in setting up the system and configuring the system that didn't need to be that complex. You can kinda tell when an engineer builds something and when a user experience person builds something, right? A lot of times the engineer, well, what's common sense to an engineer is not common sense to an end user, right? And so the designer goes in and polishes it and rounds off the edges and makes it more pleasurable to use and to navigate and intuitive, whereas an engineer is like, well, of course you just go to the command prompt and you type CPM SNFP, whatever, and it runs a batch job. Well, okay, that's not the way a user expects it to work. And we take a lot of those lessons from readily available consumer software, where they've spent an inordinate amount of money in perfecting the user experience of that software. So that's what consumers are expecting. And then we get to enterprise software and it's like using an old green screen banking system or something. And so we've really, you know, zeroed in on making the experience in every aspect of the product very user friendly, very intuitive. And again, even from an administration standpoint, we have customers that have not had to go through extensive training to use the system because it's intuitive enough.
Yeah.
What a
It
concept. You
Right.
know,
yeah.
it's make it easy to use the system so people actually use it and
Yeah.
remove the burden from the managers and leaders and, those that have a day job. And,
Yeah.
at the end of the day, we're, fortunately seeing the benefit of that because it certainly is resonating with your client base, which is very exciting to watch.
Yeah. It it
But if I'm
shouldn't require managers to spend the amount of hours they're having to spend around scheduling and timekeeping and all that they do. And so we're trying to solve for that.
That's awesome. The funny part is, though, I'm sitting here thinking, advisory companies like us are going, wow, you're actually taking all of our work away. But that's not true, right? What I love about it, and this is where Sarah and I live, is we're getting rid of the minutia
Mhm.
so that we can focus on the business outcomes. We can help. That's where we step in from a strategic perspective of trying to understand where is it you're trying to go? What is it you're trying to actually do? This is a tool. This is a more optimized tool. This is a
Yes.
better, it's going from a dull butter knife in your pocket to the sharpest blade out there, and for us, that actually frees us up to get more things done to actually drive the outcomes the business is trying to get to. You spend a lot less time drilling to how do I configure this tool? How do I train on this tool to how do I make this tool work for me? And
Yeah.
and something that just speaks volumes to me. And if you guys can keep on the leading edge there, everybody else will be playing catch up, right? And I can say right now that that's where a lot of people are. They're gonna have to go play some catch up.
Well,
So
it's flipping the model from 70% administration, 30% strategic, flipping that model to 20% administration and 80% strategic. Because if again, if I have this amazing system, it collects all this wonderful data, but if I can't make sense of that data, if I can't use that data to spot trends and make strategic business decisions within my organization, it's just a tool that collects data. And so we're trying to, when we talk about AI in a little bit, we'll talk about our thoughts on that and how we want to build intelligence into the system to help these administrators and managers and all to be able to use that data to really drive strategic business decisions within the organization.
well, let's make that jump. Let's talk about AI. So let's talk about where you are today to start with, and then we'll kind of move into your vision of the future because you hit on that a little bit here too.
Yeah.
So today, how do you look at it today?
Yeah. So today we're focused right now. The AI is around in just general intelligence in the system. So what we have found, and you guys may have found this as well. I've met with literally thousands of companies over the last 30 years. And what I find is that a lot of great people there, a lot of really intelligent people, but a lot of times what I found is that they in a lot of cases, they don't even know what they should be asking of their data or what they could be asking of their data, what's possible that they could ask of their data. And a lot of times it's because it's been in silos and isolated and they didn't have the breadth of data they have now. And now they do. And not everybody has data scientists and analysts and all that they can use. So the system, in our mind, the system needs to be intelligent enough to do what humans can't do, which is it's monitoring the data 24/7. It's always monitoring the data. It's looking for anomalies. It's looking for trends that may not easily be spotted. It's making correlations between the data that somebody it may not be obvious to somebody. And so we want AI to be surfacing that and saying, "Hey, did you know?" Or "This is something we're seeing, you need to be aware of," so that they can proactively make decisions. So we don't believe that AI should be used to make decisions where there needs to be accountability, because you can't hold AI accountable. But much like an attorney and a paralegal, the paralegal goes out, does all the research, finds the case law, and puts everything together, hands it over to the attorney. The attorney then takes that and then builds his case off of that, right? So the paralegal is the AI. It's out there looking, combing through the data and looking for these trends and anomalies and whatnot. And then it's surfacing it to the manager to say, hey, these are things that we're seeing in the system you may not be seeing, or that you need to be made aware of. And so we call that assistive intelligence rather than just AI. But so that's our first approach. Then for the frontline user, it's the ability to communicate with their smart device and do things intelligently but conversationally, like agentic AI, right? So, hey, Traxxion, when am I scheduled to work again? You're scheduled to work on Friday. I have a conflict. Can I put my shift out to bid or swap it with somebody else? Who can I swap with? And it pulls up a list of people that they can swap with. So they select somebody, or, hey, I want to pick up additional shift. Won't push me into overtime hours. We talked about this a minute ago. But to do that intelligently in a conversational way with the Traxxion application, right, on their mobile device. And then from a longer vision, looking further down the road, where we want to get to is, like intelligent forecast or intelligent demand forecasting. So where it's analyzing historical data, sales, foot traffic, weather patterns, local events, seasonality, things like that, and then predicts your labor needs with accuracy rates above 95%. That would be the idea. And then you're scheduling to actual demand, not just gut instinct. Right. And then second would be autonomous schedule optimization. So where the AI considers hundreds of variables simultaneously, along with employee skills and certifications and availability and preferences and labor laws, union rules, budget constraints, things like that, and then generates optimal schedules in seconds that would normally take a manager hours to build. It can do that automatically for you. And then third, we talk about real-time schedule intelligence, so that when someone calls out, Traxxion will instantly identify qualified replacements. It considers their current work hours, predicts the cost impact, and then can eventually offer to the shift to eligible employees, and all before your manager even opens their laptop. And then fourth, the built-in compliance engine. This is obviously kind of a no-brainer. It should always be able to manage and administer the compliance, but every schedule is automatically validated against federal, state, and local labor laws, the predictive scheduling ordinances, meal breaks, rest periods, overtime regulations, and Traxxion will ensure that you're compliant 100% of the time, eliminating, violations and penalties. And then I would say lastly, I know Kevin's ready to jump on this, but the lastly is the employee empowerment or employee engagement. So through a mobile first approach, employees manage their availability, their request times off, pick up open shifts, and swap with approved colleagues, and all within the guardrails that are established when you set Traxxion up. So this again reduces manager workload by as much as 60% and dramatically improving employee satisfaction at the same time.
Well, I think you hit on something, Jim, that was important, right? Right towards the end, especially where I think when we talk about Vince and Sarah putting in AI, we have to ensure that we also have certain guardrails,
Mm.
right, that are in place because like Jim just said, I mean, trust is everything. And so when we're trying to have the system make decisions, right, the organizations, I think they need transparency. They need to understand, why is the system making these recommendations? Right? And then making sure that every decision, like auditability, right? It's critical. Making sure that every decision is traceable, and knowing, what are the things that factor into it and why is the system recommending this, and still allowing that human oversight, right? Because AI, like Jim said, right? We want it assistive. We want it to be able to assist and make recommendations, but it's not gonna necessarily override human judgment. There's still gonna be that part of it, but specifically around compliance. right? You've got hard boundaries around those compliance. So if AI operates within the framework of, like you said, those labor laws, those policies, and those rules, well, when that's in place, that's where it starts to become a very, very powerful and safe tool,
Mhm.
right? And I think having those guardrails in place are important as well.
And
Well, and
and
also,
I think that it's important too that we don't, as Kevin said, we don't remove the human element from it, because there has to be empathy for your employees in the workplace too. You can look at names on a schedule and you go, okay, oh, they're qualified, they're not. But you also, as a good manager, as a good leader, you understand people's story and what their life experiences are, and you should be taking that into consideration as well. So AI can generate this, sterile suggestion for it, but at the same time, there has to be human empathy and judgment involved when you're scheduling those people.
Vince and I have always called it the art and the science, right? It's,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
a science to it, but you also need to know that, Susie's son has soccer practice on Wednesdays and he
Yeah.
works hard to get on the team and she doesn't want to miss it. And,
Yeah.
Mary's mom has dialysis, and if whatever you can do to make sure that she doesn't have to work Friday afternoons, like those are, when we talk about that employee engagement element, that's what keeps people with your organization through the hard
Yeah.
times, the lean times, and,
Mhm.
sticking with you. And AI, for all that it's doing really incredible, cool things, I'm so excited to watch where it goes. That's the piece we can't lose as leaders, is that empathy, that understanding and knowing our people and saying, hey, I see you and I've got my eye on it. And the
Yeah.
schedule may be 98% perfect, but I'm going to make those tweaks to make sure you know that I got you.
Yeah. And
it's
doing the right thing never goes negative, right? So if you do the right thing and you take care of your people, they'll respond. They'll be loyal, they'll be more engaged, they'll be more willing to work with you if if you look after them and make sure that you're taking care of them, working within their life.
Mhm.
And it's a pretty basic concept, but a lot of times it just gets lost in the day to day.
the further you go upstream in an organization, typically the further it gets, the more it gets lost,
Yeah.
unfortunately. It really does. So, but yeah, hey, you guys are, I think you're laying out something good here, right? It's, and I think people always have to respect the fact, remember the fact AI is a tool.
Yeah.
Right? As much as people are, sometimes getting into doom and gloom, it's going to take over everything. If it takes over things and it's being used improperly, it's given authority it should not have. And so that's where I love the fact that you guys are thinking about these guardrails as you grow into how you're going to use AI and how it's going to be leveraged. Because I think that's a great approach to it.
Well,
Um,
people said the computer was going to eliminate everybody's job. And now it's just a tool for me to do my job, right? AI is a tool. I use it every day and it's phenomenal. But you still have to know what it's talking about when you're deciphering what it's producing for you. Otherwise, you take things at face value and you're wrong. It's wrong, right? So,
you mean like half the postings out on social media right now that are inaccurate?
yeah, something like that.
Or when ChatGPT, I asked it a question and it started to get sassy with me. So Vince and I are still laughing about that. I'm like, when did ChatGPT start getting mouthy? Like, hold on a second. I
Got
can
an attitude. Huh?
I
I
need
don't
it
like
back
the way you asked
home.
that question.
It's actually started calling me. Yeah, it started calling me by my first name last week. Like usually it just responds, and then now it's like, "Hey, Vince, let me tell you about this." I'm like, "Hold
Yeah.
on."
By next week, he'll be calling you Vincey. Look,
If
Vincey,
pro-
here's
if that happens, I know Martin Lineson's behind it because he's the only one that's ever called me that. All right, hey, we are getting close to time here, so let's
yeah.
talk about. I want to give you guys some opportunities to kind of make some future statements, or of where do you see the industry going? Where do you see challenges? If you could give one nugget of information out there to those who are WFM leaders and organizations, what would it be? Kind of carte blanche here of, what's your going away thing that you want people to hear about your guys' vision and traction and all the above?
I'll let
Yeah.
Jim
So
answer.
I think that the harder something is, the more prone it is to stay status quo.
Mm.
The harder it is, the less likely it is to be innovated, the less likely it is to be have the envelope pushed on it. Because if it ain't broke, don't fix it. It works. It's, let's just like leave it alone. We'll make minor tweaks here and there, but we're good. And there's no compulsion to really make it. And part of that too is just, again, that technical and functional debt of the way things used to be done. And some people still do that. And so it's got to stay there. And we don't have any of that technical or functional debt. We started from scratch. So I think for us, it's about, okay, just because this is the way it's been done doesn't mean we can't refactor it or come up with a better mousetrap, if you will, or a better way of doing it. That's part of innovation, right? Steve Jobs, famous when he launched the iPad. He said, our job is not just to give people what they want, because they'll still be asking for a laptop. Instead, it was, we want people to see and have what they don't even know that they need or want. When the iPad came out, everybody's like, "Oh, it's just a big iPhone." Until you got one in your hands the first time, and now go to any meeting and look for the people that don't have an iPad. Everybody's got an iPad, right? Because it's an unbelievable consumption device. And so for us, we're looking to push the boundaries, to innovate as much as we can, and do it in such a way that we can stay progressive with it, but you'll still stay true to the foundational elements of WFM that have to be there. Sounds like I'm
Kevin,
running for
anything
office.
that was awesome. Kevin, anything you wanna add to that?
No, I mean, I think, companies have been talking about this for a long time, right? The importance of real-time visibility and intelligence. But if you look at it though, it's like I think most organizations are still they rely heavily on historical reporting, right? Even though everybody's been talking about it, but the truth is they still rely on this historical reporting. And I think the real advantage, right? The real trend coming out is going to be understanding what is happening now and what is about to happen next, right? And I think that shift will help define kind of the next generation of where workforce management is going,
Mhm.
right? And, like Jim said, getting answers to those questions, you're not even sure what to ask. But I can see, you know, the shift if there as with the push of AI and all the other tools that are available, that information is coming much more readily to them and helping them make those decisions real time versus waiting to play catch up because now they're getting all that historical data. And I think
Mhm.
it's going to just continue to get, more prominent and just be a much, you know, better place for them to be able to get to, as the industry continues.
I love that answer, and I love both you guys' answer, but, I mean, I take what you guys are talking about, and especially the way you put it there, Kevin, is hey, that's not just applicable to workforce management.
Mhm.
That's across everything. If you're not thinking about how do you make yourself better and innovated and driving innovation, and how do you leverage that to future decisions and where you're going to make sure you're headed down the right path, you know what? Your days are numbered.
Yeah,
Sorry.
Yep.
agreed.
There truly are, and I even look at that in with our competitors, and from a delivery and service and advisory perspective. There's some that just aren't looking at it in an innovative way of how can they do things differently, and I guarantee you we're looking at it differently, right? That's why we're having that conversation today. So awesome, Sarah. I'll throw it to you. Any closing words or any closing questions before we wrap this up?
No questions, but closing words. I just want to reiterate how much I appreciate y'all. And every time I get to have a conversation with you both, it's energizing for me that you're in this space and truly that you are doing what you're doing, keeping the customer at the forefront because I don't see it every day. And I say that one as somebody who's just a workforce management nerd and loves it, but somebody who is doing what I do because I started as a customer and who does what I do every day with the customer in mind and is having to solve all of these problems because people aren't thinking about the customer. And it's one of the reasons I'm so grateful that we get to be a partner of yours and work with you all every day. Keep it up. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for thinking of these things and having that at the forefront of kind of your business philosophy, because I really do see it making an impact. And it makes me want to get up and go out there and keep doing this, even though it's really tough, because not not all of the problems can be solved, but there's a lot that we can do differently. And it's just really cool to know that there are people out there who are, making those little small tweaks that make it a little bit easier for people to show up and go to work every day. So well done, you. Keep it up.
Thank you. Yeah, we focus on three things: culture, product, and service. And that's it. Our agenda is very simple: culture, product, and service.
There you go. Well, Jim, Kevin, thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Hopefully we can have you guys again down the road if you'll be willing to join us.
So looking forward to it.
Absolutely. Anytime.